It all began on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing remarkable happens. I worked at a small cafe in the heart of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I was fine with that. My days followed a simple rhythm: work, home, sleep, and I found comfort in the routine. But then, everything changed the day he walked in. I'll never forget the first time I saw him. He wasn't the kind of man who immediately draws attention, but there was something about him. It wasn't just the way he dressed or how his hair was always neatly combed. It was the calmness in his presence, the quiet confidence in his smile. When he ordered his coffee, there was a warmth in his eyes, something deep that I couldn't explain. I couldn't help but notice him every morning as he became a regular, always coming in before heading to work. At first, our conversations were simple. "Good morning. How's your day?" But over time, they grew longer, more meaningful. He told me his name, Tom, and I told him mine. And then I started noticing the small details: his wedding ring, always shining in the light. He was married, yet somehow he made me feel like I was the only one in the room when we spoke. There was a kindness in his voice, a gentleness in the way he listened that made me feel safe, like I'd known him for years. It wasn't supposed to be anything more than casual small talk, but each day I found myself looking forward to his visits. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled me in despite the quiet warning in the back of my mind. Chapter 2. The growing connection. As the weeks went by, our conversations grew deeper. At first, they were just small talks about the weather, our daily routines. But soon we started sharing more about our lives. He told me about his job, the things he loved, and the challenges he faced. I shared my dreams, the little things that made me smile, and the hopes I held close to my heart. Every conversation felt like a gift, and I began to look forward to his visits more than I'd like to admit. There was something about him that made me feel special in a way I hadn't in years. It wasn't just the way he listened, or the way he remembered the smallest details about me. It was the way he made me feel seen, like I mattered. He had this genuine warmth that made me want to be near him, to share more of myself with him. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line. He was married, and I was just a barista. I had no right to feel what I was feeling. But my heart didn't listen to my logic. Every smile, every word he spoke pulled me in further. I didn't want to fall for him, but it felt impossible to stop. One afternoon, the cafe was quiet, and the sun was beginning to set. He stayed longer than usual, and we talked about life. He asked me what I dreamed of doing, and for the first time, I shared my deepest thoughts with him. "I just want to feel truly alive," I said softly. "Not just survive." He looked at me, and for a moment I saw a spark in his eyes. "I understand that feeling," he said. "Life can feel so routine, but it doesn't have to be." That night, his words echoed in my mind. I didn't know what was happening between us, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Chapter 3. The confession weeks passed, and my feelings for him only grew stronger. I found myself thinking about him constantly. I'd see something funny and instantly wonder what he'd think. I'd head to work, secretly hoping he'd come in, even though I knew it wasn't right. It felt like I was falling into a web I couldn't escape from. He was married, and I was just someone he talked to every morning. His wife, I imagined, was at home waiting for him, while I was here, getting lost in emotions I had no business feeling. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. We sat at our usual table by the window, the cafe quiet and almost empty. The sunlight filtered through the glass, and there was a stillness in the air. He looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice steady but filled with hesitation. My heart skipped a beat. "My marriage, it's not what it used to be. We've been growing apart for a while now." I froze, my heart racing. His words hit me like a shockwave, but I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to pull away, to tell him we couldn't go down this path, but my heart wasn't listening. It was beating too loudly, drowning out all the warnings in my mind. He looked out the window for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I don't know if I can leave her," he continued quietly, "but I can't stop thinking about you." My chest tightened, a mix of shock and longing flooding over me. He couldn't be saying this, but he was. Every word felt like it was pulling me deeper into a world I wasn't sure I was ready for. Chapter 4. The Struggle. After that day, everything changed. The lines between right and wrong blurred, and I found myself questioning everything. Was I wrong for feeling what I felt? Was it selfish to want him for myself, even though I knew he was married? My heart said one thing, but my mind screamed the opposite. I tried to push him out of my thoughts. I told myself to focus on my life, to keep my distance. But it wasn't that simple. Every time I saw him, my heart would race. Every time we spoke, it felt like the world around us disappeared. I couldn't stop thinking about him, and from the way he looked at me, from the way his words lingered, it seemed like he couldn't either. But how could we be together? How could I even allow myself to want him, knowing he had a family? A wife who had no idea that her husband was sharing his deepest thoughts with me. I knew I was standing at a crossroads, caught between the pull of my heart and the reality of our situation. I had to make a choice. Walk away, cut him out of my life, or let myself fall deeper into a love that was forbidden. But the problem wasn't just the love between us. It was everything that came with it. The lies, the guilt, the heartache. I couldn't ignore the weight of it all. Falling in love with a married man wasn't just about the emotions between us. It was about the pain it would cause, the hurt I'd carry, the hurt he'd carry, and the broken trust that would inevitably follow. But despite all of that, part of me wanted to keep going, even though I knew it would never be easy. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. One evening, he came into the cafe looking more tired than usual. His face was pale, and there was a sadness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He didn't smile when he walked in, and the usual warmth between us seemed to be missing. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft with concern. He sat down at our usual table, his shoulders heavy with something I couldn't see but could feel. "I'm not sure I can keep living like this," he said quietly. his voice low, almost broken. Caught between two worlds, but I can't leave her. I made vows. My heart shattered in that moment. He was right. He was caught, and so was I. He had a family, a life that he couldn't just walk away from, and I couldn't be the reason he tore it apart. I loved him, but I couldn't live with the guilt of being the one to break his heart and destroy the life he had built, even though it felt like my own heart was breaking too. I knew what I had to do. I can't keep doing this, I whispered, barely able to hold back the tears. I need to let go. His eyes were full of pain, and for a moment, I thought he might try to stop me, but he didn't. He knew deep down that what we were doing wasn't right. We both knew that. We had pushed so far, but the truth had caught up with us. I had to walk away. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I knew it was the only way to stop the damage. Letting go was the only choice left, even if it felt like my soul was breaking into pieces. Chapter 6. The Farewell. The next day, I didn't show up at the cafe. I needed time to process everything, to let the weight of my decision settle in. He came in as usual, but I wasn't there to greet him. The seat by the window, our spot, was empty. He left a note for me before he left. It was simple, just a few words that carried the weight of everything we had shared. I unfolded it slowly, my hands trembling. The note read, "I'll always remember you, but I have to go back to my life." Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at the words. I didn't want to cry, didn't want to admit how much it hurt, but it felt like my heart had been ripped out. He was right. He had a life, a family, and he couldn't stay in this world we had created together, no matter how much we cared for each other. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my drawer. I didn't want to look at it, but I knew I had to. It was the last piece of him I would have, the last reminder of a love that could never be. That was the last time I saw him. We both walked away, carrying the memories of a love that wasn't meant to be. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but sometimes letting go is the only way to heal. Conclusion, moving on. Falling in love with a married man is one of those experiences that stays with you long after it's over. It's messy, painful, and full of so many emotions that you don't even know how to deal with them. You question everything, your choices, your feelings, your worth. I don't regret meeting him, not for a second. He taught me things I never expected to learn, but deep down, I knew it couldn't last. Sometimes, love doesn't work out the way we hope or expect, and as much as it hurts, that's okay. What matters is the lessons we take from it. I learned that love isn't always perfect, and it doesn't always look the way we think it should. It's complicated, messy, and sometimes it requires sacrifice. I had to walk away because it wasn't right, not just for me, but for him and his family. And as painful as that was, I knew it was the only way forward. I moved on, and over time, I healed. But that chapter of my life taught me something valuable. Love is complicated, but the most important thing is to be true to yourself, to honor your own needs, your own heart. In the end, we have to live with our choices, and I chose to walk away, even though it broke me, because I knew that being true to myself, being brave enough to let go, was the only way I could ever move on.